When I say who knows, not me, at the end of all of my videos, it is so accurate, so real. I started this week thinking it was going to be a redrawing childhood characters week, but I ended up stopping in the middle of working on those designs because I couldn't focus on anything besides drawing architecture and also making these cursed possum cupcakes for my partner's birthday. So the only reasonable conclusion to come to is that if I could choose what I fixate on each week, I would be far too powerful for this world. So congrats, we're all getting a main course of me struggling to draw buildings with a side of my campaign lore. Also, I'm just gonna say it right now, like I do in pretty much every video where I dabble in drawing landscapes or buildings, this is not my forte. I know in theory what I'm supposed to be doing, but I really don't have any built-up experience with drawing landscapes or architecture, so if it's so bad that you can't handle it, just stand about 30 feet away from the screen, squint real hard, and pretend that you see the vision. Today I am drawing just a very small snippet of the capital city of Excinere. In my campaign lore, Excinere is the city where the Empress resides, and also the city that is considered the heart of the old empire. It's a very technologically advanced society, a hub for artificers and alchemists and all manner of scientists. If you're looking for spell components, mechanical components, or just an expert in a very niche thing, you're likely to find it in the capital city. That is, if you can navigate it. Newcomers can find the city incredibly overwhelming, as it's a huge twisted construction of bridges and winding roads up and down hills and around various water features. But it's pretty easy to get used to the overall structure of the city, as it can be thought of as a big multi-tiered cake made of smaller tiered cakes. At the top of the mound that Excinere sits on is the castle and all the fortifications around it, which also includes the more formal warden training hall as well as the barracks. Descending outward and into the next layer, you have buildings for government offices, higher education centers, libraries, some of the nicer couture or luxury shops, jewelers, and a few houses for select individuals. Both of these levels have buildings that are often built of white stone and concrete, with copper domes that have been heavily patinaed over with that blue-green oxidation. Continuing to the next layer of the cake, we have the busiest ring around the city called the Copper Circuit, which is named both for the heavy use of the metal in alchemy and craftsmanship, as well as the general color of the area. Here's where you'll find all your potion crafters, toy makers, blacksmiths, healers, adventuring guilds, incense sellers, pretty much any sort of merchant or service that you could ever need can be found in this section. But most importantly, you will find an abundance of street food with flavors hailing from all across Vasseldal. You are just as likely to find Ixerulian spiced slow roasted meats for dinner as you are to find buttery, flaky, Karadish pastries for dessert. And the best part is, the stands are probably only about 15 feet away from each other. The next tier of the cake is the housing section, where both permanent and temporary lodging can be found. Schools and facilities for younger children can also be found in this area so that the younger citizens of Excinere don't have to travel so far from their families or through the incredibly busy Copper Circuit to get an education. Smaller businesses can also be found in this area, businesses owned by those who cannot afford or don't want a spot in the Copper Circuit. Someone who sells both fresh plants for your garden and dried ones for your eggs. A father who bakes hand pies in whatever flavors he can get his hands on for the week. An embroiderer whose formal training is darning the holes in their young nephew's pants, but accidentally began a business after the patterns became so popular with the toddlers in the nurseries. And the last and largest layer of the cake is reserved for logging camps that need to be near the city gates to go into the forest, warden housing for those that need to take watches on the outermost walls of the city, and farmers because food is the foundation of society. On your way into the city, you pass rolling waves of wheat and corn, massive orchards, and berry farms. It doesn't matter how important you are, if the cows are crossing the road to change fields, you're not getting through until they get through. And though they maybe don't have the finest of ales or the most exotic of flavors, you'll always be able to find a cozy tavern in this area with homemade cider, a warm hunter's stew, and fresh baked bread with a good thick crust to go with it. Unfortunately, because I'm really bad at thinking on a large scale for drawings, and since I'm just so used to drawing a single person with no perspective at all, we are only getting a very, very small snippet of the central structures. Government offices, really, not even the main castle. I did genuinely go in with the intention attention to draw the castle, but I finished this drawing and just felt like it wasn't good enough to be the castle. It's absolutely still incredibly luxurious with the flowing water and the river walks and the glass windows, but that's just a testament to how long Excinere has been around and how much money has flowed through it over the years, which is definitely not an excuse I just made up because this drawing didn't turn out how I planned. 100%, and I feel like it shows, the art I made of this part of the city is inspired very much by Piltover from the League of Legends animated series Arcane. I'm not caught up in it yet, so mark your comments if you're going to go through spoilers for season 2. But in a lot of ways, thematically, Piltover and Excinere are very alike. A lot of incredibly influential people congregate here. Scientific advancements and arcane engineering are very, very highly valued, and those who study it are regarded with a tremendous amount of respect. Also, not unlike the Arcane series, although there's not a whole separate underground society run by various mob factions, there is a dark underbelly to the sparkling city of Excinere. With Excinere being such a hotspot for trade and travel and so many little alleyways in the copper circuit and throughout the city as a whole, really, it is equally a hotspot for significantly less legal forms of merchantry. While the albeit a little heavy-handed presence of the guards and wardens in the city streets help to keep things relatively safe, there are a multitude of black market exchange routes and underground societies within the deepest veins and darkest corners of Excinere City. And Excinere is a city that's ever building upwards. Its foundations are the city that came before it and the fortress that came before that. Who can say what sort of network of tunnels and secret passages are being used or created underneath the streets? But most people aren't aware of that. While there is an acknowledgement of the exceedingly vertical construction, it's commonly held that the capital city was built on a hill or a plateau of sorts, or at the very least a solid slab of rock. After all, it's much easier to sleep at night when you can't hear the rodents crawling in your walls. Alright, I filled this entire episode with lore and city descriptions because I really have no artistic value or advice to give regarding cityscapes. Honestly, watching this drawing process back, it feels pretty cursed. Not that my drawing process isn't already pretty cursed. This just feels more cursed than usual. I work from front to back, I put in shapes and then use various tools to match things around until they feel right. This is not a tutorial video. Go learn architectural drawing from someone else, I'm begging you. But what I do want to talk about is my city or village or town concept building process. Obviously this is going to be from a D&D perspective, but I think it's pretty applicable for anything that you need or want to apply world building to. For every city, of course, I always have a thread of an idea here and there. It can be anything as large or specific as a kind of governing structure or the general climate and foliage, to as small as a specific NPC interaction that I want to set a stage for. From there, I take a hint from many a D&D campaign setting book and get a very rough idea written down for 3.5 very important descriptive categories or questions. Number 1, I answer the question of what is the general feel of the city? When a player walks into a city, in the broadest sense, what are they seeing? Is it a large city? Is it a small town? Is it very densely populated and busy or sparsely populated? And from there you can work your way down and flesh out some of the more specific ideas. Maybe the village is located near mines or a mountain range and there is a lot of stone that's used in construction. Maybe your city is located on a seashore, and because of the coastal access, it's a popular import and export site. Maybe because it's a very scenic location and so many people have stopped by and ended up deciding to stick around, the population has a wide variety of different races. Or maybe they live in a place where not a lot of fresh food can be grown, so the streets are filled with the smell of smoked meats and dried fruits are a very common addition to dishes. The second category that I try to break down is creating at least one, but more likely 2 or 3 goals for each city to have. This can also help you figure out the general attitude of locals regarding overarching themes in your stories, which can in turn help you figure out NPC behavior in a pinch. An example from my own campaign is Agnatha. Agnatha is a military city for Excinere. Agnatha's main goals are training soldiers to be ready for action and securing the old empire's border. Most NPCs in this area likely live here because they are military families, and a lot of the jobs in this area will be focused around supporting the the military. Meanwhile, Excinere, one of my neutral territories, wants nothing to do with either side of the war. They're happy as long as they are left to their own devices. However, their own devices do tend to include shady methods of gaining a profit, so NPCs in this area are more likely to aid a person on either side of the conflict, given that it has the right monetary reward attached to it. Number 3 is answering the question of how the city is run. I know politics are not super fun at the moment, or more honestly ever, but thankfully fantasy politics can be whatever you want them to be, and they truly do play a huge role in the overall vibe of the city. Excinere, as an empire and not just the city, actually has a council of delegates from each section of the map that come to report to the Empress on the needs of their designated region, but even the individual sections have their own smaller governments. Warpwood is ruled by a priestess. Karatos, on the other hand, has the more stereotypical medieval structure with a king and a queen running the land. Excinere is run by a fantasy mafia, and Basilia has 8 judges making decisions for the city. All of these evoke a certain feeling and attitude. Warpwood has very traditional and religious citizens. Karatos is a lot larger than other cities and has an incredibly well-funded and prestigious University of Arcana. Excinere attracts a lot of people who like an environment where they can fend for themselves and nobody asks too many questions about it. And Basilia is full of libraries and courts, and people even have their preferred politicians among the 8. And this is where the and a half comes in. I was going to call it point 4, but it really ties into point number 3, because as a reward for all my big brain thinking about city construction and structure and priorities, I get to make a list of the NPCs or organizations that I think are the most influential to the city, which doesn't have to be, but generally tends to be the people that run it, like Empress Madrive for Excinere, Priestess Solril Heavy Ridge for Warpwood, and the Ouroboros family in Excinere. Obviously, this isn't a conclusive list of all the NPCs that players are ever allowed to interact with, but at least I have a few big names that people look to for guidance or inspiration or to take responsibility. So in review, city vibe, city goals, city government, and as a treat, special specific NPCs or organizations. And even if it's just one sentence about each of those things, it really helps me to get a good sense of what a town prioritizes, and from there, to me, it feels very natural to think about these smaller details. But on that note, class is over, our drawing is finished. I hope any part of this video was fun, and hopefully at least some of it was informative. My world building advice probably won't work for everyone, but it does work very, very well for me, and I hope it helps a couple of you out there organize your thoughts as well. As for the drawing, I think it's pretty obvious that I don't have patience for architectural design. If I did, I probably would have gone to school for architecture, and this drawing didn't really turn out the way that I was picturing it. That being said, I do think the colors are nice. I think the buildings are cool, and as I was working on this, I figured that I kind of want to do a separate drawing for the copper circuit anyways, like maybe a street view with all the signs hanging down and the food stalls and maybe some fun character designs. I also might make an aerial view traditional map of the whole city and the various rings, just because I think it might make things easier for navigation and it's a nice thing to have available to your players. But hey, at the very least, if this drawing did anything, it helped me to get some gears turning about Excinere Capital and the other architectural drawings that I want to make regarding this area. And with that, thank you so much for watching and sticking around until the end of the video. I am hoping that it's not 3 weeks in a row of campaign building, because it would be so cool if I could focus on any of the dozens of other ideas that I have and projects I've started, although I do have a bad habit of bulking all the same kinds of videos in a small space of time because that's what my body wants to do and the heart wants what it wants. And besides, this campaign needs work on it anyways, so who knows? Not me.